Okay, I think we're good.
Nice.
All right. Well, hello,
Nice.
everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
So great to be here with you all. Today we are here with Fawziyya Sugai. She is the founder of Gwell, and we are Megan and Sam. We are the co-founders of Here Now Creative Co. Today we're going to dive in a little bit into brand strategy and how to transform that brand strategy over to your social strategy. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we worked with Gwell and how we took her brand identity and helped give her direction for her social strategy, and then how she took that direction and transformed it and uses it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess to kick things off, Fawziyya, do you want to give us a little bit more background of Gwell too, so we have a little more background before we dive in?
Sure. So Gwell, I guess the first thing that I think is, worth noting is Gwell is a Welsh word and it means better. And I think that kind of translated through a lot of the things we did. So it's definitely very relevant. But outside of that, we're a plant-based snack brand. I started it because I needed something to help me get through day-to-day life, working a busy career and struggling with chronic illness. I think the things that people get excited about Gwell is that they can get, snacks that are indulgent, but also have super functional benefits. So we like to say that you get snacks with benefits, and that's who we are.
Love it. Snacks with
Love it.
benefits. Awesome. All right. So the first thing, kind of to jump in a little bit to strategy, brand strategy, and how that transforms into social. The first thing that we really looked at is, when you came to us, you had your brand identity already fleshed out. You had worked with another branding agency and had new branding, new packaging, everything ready to go. So that made our jobs very easy. So we looked first at kind of the goals of what you were wanting to achieve. We looked at how how you wanted to be known for from a branding perspective, and how you wanted people to remember you, and how you wanted to share your message.
Yeah.
So I think those were the first kind of goals that we looked at. And we looked at both your kind of long-term and short-term goals.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of to share some with everyone. So your short-term goals were to make consistent engagement a habit, to increase awareness, and to build credibility and encourage product trial. And then the long-term goals were to build community and drive direct sales.
Yeah. And I would say, in addition to the goals, one of the big things for me was understanding where our team was at, like today, and what we could support. So a big part of how we approached what we were looking for as we're working for you all is understanding like what our team was capable of executing within, the vision of what those short and long-term goals are.
Definitely. And I think actually, as we talk about that, what are some of the Gwell brand values? Because I know we looked at those as well, and that's how we determined what your objectives were going to be for your social strategy, or for your direction anyway.
I think I'm like, brevity is key. Let's see. I would say that overall for us, brand values are just like being authentic, keeping things simple, and being a voice in like a somewhat crowded space of wellness that is like super grounded and focused on helping people just like take daily steps. Like, basically, we're not perfect. Neither is, anyone out there. But how can we create a community around people who are just making steps every day to like feel better?
Yeah. I remember looking a lot at the authenticity. I think that's something when we were talking about how you wanted to show up on social, how do we bring in that authenticity? Because I remember us talking about, there's so much unattainable things happening in wellness, or like, you have to have this 10-step morning routine or do all these things to be well. And I think that was something that we really wanted to look at with your social content and direction, in terms of like, okay, how do we make it feel more real? How do we make this like really approachable for people and not, be like, the goop of the wellness world. Definitely was not the goal here.
I think it was really to capture like everyday life, and everyday life looks different for everyone, but just acknowledging that like you're not necessarily starting from zero. There are aspects of like your everyday life that, you know, promote wellness and how you grew up, ingredients you've used, you know, forever, that maybe you just need to bring them back, or maybe you just need a new way of enjoying them that's easier for you, but just kind of leaning into the reality of every day.
Yeah. I would say like inclusivity and attainability too, because yeah, like what you're saying, like the wellness community is already so saturated with like, you have to have this certain product that costs, you know, $100 or whatever that only certain people are going to buy. So I feel like you guys making it very attainable and very inclusive to people of like all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of even lifestyles too. So I think that was really nice and really important to include when we were working together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there was like an element of fun too, even just looking at some of the stuff that we came up with and some of the content, right? We wanted it to be wellness, but also fun. I think that was another thing we looked at with some of your competitors or some just other, you know, products in the wellness world, is that it's like so serious. And I think we wanted to bring in this playfulness, and because your products are fun. They're cookies, they're snack bites, they're very like quick snacks, so they should be fun.
Yeah. That was actually kind of a challenge for me because I'm laughing right now, but like I don't necessarily consider myself a funny person. Like I kind of have a dry humor. So it's like, how do I translate that into something that's a little bit more like relatable? So I think having, you know, more, I don't know if whimsical is the word, but, you know, some visuals that represented like that playfulness is super helpful for us, particularly when like everyone on our team isn't necessarily like always that or able to translate it as effectively with like copy or just, you know, like on camera.
Yeah. Well, and the content is so educational that, you know, it is nice to have like kind of a break from that and just, even if it's in like a fun layout or like an unexpected thing with the educational part, I think it makes the whole experience of consuming the content so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
There was also, I think that kind of ties back into the authenticity piece, because I know we talked about this a lot, even kind of more recently, where you were saying, you know, I want to show up and I want to be putting content out there, but how do I do it in a way that, you know, feels like feels like me? And I think we've talked about trends. I think there's so many trends, not only in branding and design, but there's also trends on social, and it feels like you have to keep up with them. So that was something, I think, keeping that authenticity and looking at those, filtering things through your brand values, right? So if we are going to be the educator, if we are going to be ingredient focused, or, you know, whatever those brand values are, having that as the filter for how you approach your strategy and your content.
And we really do use this social direction that you all developed for us, and it's almost like a filter. So if we're creating content, kind of start with, does this content help to build community? Does this content help to educate and inform? Or does this content help to expand awareness of our product? If it doesn't do any of those things, then we'll kind of go back to the drawing board and say, all right, what are we really trying to accomplish? But that's the very first filter we apply to everything that we do.
Yeah, definitely. I think you guys have done such a great job of it too. And you've kept it consistent. I feel like that's another thing that everyone is always like, how do I keep things consistent? So I think that you guys have done a really great job with that. I guess, how would you say, I mean, if you have any examples of, you know, how you've been able to create that consistency? I know we gave you kind of like a framework and a guideline to follow, but how have you been able to take that and use that in your day-to-day?
I think one was, we were really specific about the framework of what we needed. So we said, these are the specific types of content. Like, it wasn't like these are the only ones. It wasn't that rigid, but it gave us a really good framework to build off of. So even if you created one type of content like that for us, we knew within the skill set of our team that we could recreate that for all of the different flavors we have, or we could repurpose that and do it in a different way, or change the colors and still apply the same idea of what that content was capturing. And I think that's been the most helpful to us, is just really ensuring that what we worked to create together was something that could translate in multiple ways versus just being a one-off. Because a one-off is great if you've got a big budget and you can just keep going back consistently for content, but that was definitely not the case for us. So we needed it to be something that was replicable and adaptable. So we might use it for stories and then reformat it and use it in feed, or reformat it and use it as a Pinterest pin with a little bit more information. So that versatility, I think, is what has helped us to maintain the consistency.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm looking kind of too at the content breakdown, kind of some ideas we gave you, and essentially like points of like pillars, right, basically. So we had things that were very ingredient focused. We wanted to give you essentially a platform for how to share all of the information, because we knew you wanted to really prioritize education and talk about the benefits of the ingredients in your products. So I think we started with giving you some essentially like how you can frame this education, how you can frame this could potentially lengthy like content. So some ones we looked at were focusing on ingredient and ingredient education. So starting with, here's the ingredients, and then here's kind of the benefits of those ingredients, or here's why we use those ingredients. And then something for a little bit of humor and relatability. I know you mentioned you don't think you're a funny person, but I think even just a way to bring that lightheartedness in, because you definitely do have that. That is very authentic to you, and just knowing you and working with you, that you do have this, lighthearted energy. So a way to bring that in. And then looking at the product, each product specifically, and then a way to bring in some education for each individual product. And then obviously some highlights on you and the founder and your story, and then reviews and flavor and product highlights as well. So those were just a couple that we gave you. And then I think you've really taken those and run with them for sure.
The only thing I would say is that we started with that, but then we also got a read on what worked, what didn't, what did people react to. So for instance, the static product reviews, aesthetically, they, reflect who we are as a brand, but they weren't necessarily things that got people excited all the time. So we actually had to redo how we did that. We would still show it, but we might show a product image first and use it in a carousel. So then people would kind of say, oh, this looks good. And then they would see a review that kind of reinforced what they were thinking might be true about the product. So I think some of those things really helped us to take it a step further. Now we have these things, where the best places for us to use them to have the most impact.
And that's really important. Is I feel like when you get a direction and we give you, say the pillars, or here's a framework, it's important to look at the engagement and the data behind it, because it can change. It's something that's probably always going to evolve. And I think having a framework is nice to follow, but it can change. It doesn't have to be so rigid. It doesn't have to be super calculated. I think we're kind of moving away from that in social in general. It's be a little bit more genuine, a little bit more real, especially with I don't know. I just feel like people are so done with the perfect post, the perfect calculated feed with certain algorithm and all that.
Which is music to our ears, but
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The other thing we did with reviews also is I started doing a series, because one thing we didn't talk about as much when we initially did this was video. But with TikTok growing and Reels becoming more important, I started doing a series. I think it's called the CEO Reacts to product reviews. So instead of just putting the review on the screen, I'll react. So I'll read a review and share my perspective on what the customer said about the product. So we definitely gotten good feedback and engagement from that versus just putting the review up there. So this definitely was a framework for us to build off of in a lot of different ways, which has been super helpful.
I love that. That's so fun. And it pulls in two pillars, right? You're talking about reviews, and then you're also bringing you and yourself and your personality in there as well. So it brings two pillars together.
Lightheartedness.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. It's kind of just it's not so serious. It's the reaction videos, everyone loves those, because it's
Yeah.
you read it in real time. You get to like interact with it, especially if you do it live. You interact with like the audience there and right there and then. So yeah.
And it's been fun also because like, people who leave the reviews, they're like, oh, you read my review? And it's a way of building community. Also,
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
really
Yeah.
see their reactions. They're like, oh, that's so cool that you notice. Which, I mean, I notice every review probably too much, but I didn't realize how much like people really also care when you acknowledge that you notice as much as they do. So that's been really fun for me.
yeah, absolutely.
sure.
That's huge for community building, right? You're really seeing each individual customer
Oh,
and
yeah.
saying, I hear your feedback. I'm reading it. Like
Yeah.
myself, the founder, I'm reading every single review. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some other content that was kind of a lot of product based, but we also looked at lifestyle. I think this was a big one too, and especially with the authenticity and approachability and making it realistic for everyone's lifestyle or most people's lifestyles. I think that was a big thing that we talked about too. And we looked at, let's see, not just product imagery. I think that was a big part of it. We wanted to pull in the actual people who are using the product, right? I think that was part of the pulling in that community value and that community element as well, was to focus on the people who are eating the product, not just the product itself.
Yeah. And I would say going into this was something that was a challenge for us because, so much of our community is shopping online, or so how do we capture that? And one thing I would say is we've definitely gotten a lot more user generated content. Like if I'm kind of going through some of the things we talked about, it was user generated content, giveaways and collabs. And we definitely got and did a lot more of that to build community. But I do still see for us an opportunity to show more of, as I call it, Gwell in the wild. So I think that's a place where we have the opportunity to further develop and use more of the guidance that you all provided, because I'm even looking at it now and I'm like, yeah, we really need to do more of that. I really wanted to do more of that and I haven't gotten there yet. So it's actually refreshing to me to know that there's still more that we can do with this, like that we've still only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk product photography for a second, because it's super important in establishing your brand identity, especially in the beginning, but it can be costly to maintain, especially if you're just starting. So I would love to talk about kind of how you approach that. I know you guys do have beautiful product photography that you got when you first, when you're going through your brand rebrand. So you have that beautiful pillar to start with, but how do you guys kind of approach that now moving forward, and so that you have continued stuff to use? Do you just keep reusing the stuff you have, or how do you guys approach it?
So I would say it's kind of a couple of different ways. First, we did have a really lovely set of product photography from Aaron of Hungry Boy, which was super great in terms of a place to start. But what I really also liked about that was the versatility of it. So we had a few pieces of content that were, still images, and then some more like animated images. But the way we've used it in multiple ways is really just repurposing it for multiple platforms, cropping it differently to focus on different products. So, and then also expanding it to use it like on our website, in banners, in like our email campaigns as well. So what we realize is like, you might think you're using something over and over again, but it's not necessarily true that the same person is seeing it over and over again. And if the same person is seeing it over and over again, I don't remember what the number is, but it takes them like 7 times to see it to even be there. So I think you can't be afraid of like reinforcing your brand message. I mean, of course you have to know like when you've like done it too much, but I think you can't be afraid of using that and having that imagery and that story resonate across multiple platforms in different ways to really like kind of like push your message home. I would say in terms of go forward strategy, I mean, if we had the budget, we'd love to use them again. But internally, we've been trying to capture more like video content. instead of some of the stills, just because for us, we're able to do that more effectively. So we've got some more of that coming, but I would also say we've got really great visual direction from you and from like the work we did with Hungry Boy and the other like brand partner that we had. So with those things, we've been able to still like capture photography that we feel is still consistent and aligned with like who we are as a brand. So that's enjoyable. I mean, right now I've been doing most of it myself, but our social media manager, we had some images he's done that like I actually just brightened them up to align with our imagery now, because before we used to be kind of dark and moody and now we're a little bit more vibrant. So we just brightened them up and we were able to like repurpose them and give them a new life.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to get creative with it. And even just using the same thing over and over again, even if you feel like it's repetitive, like you said, it takes them like 7 times or something, but also it's just like consistency, brand recognition, brand loyalty, all of it. It builds all of that over time. And I feel like people on the side where if you're the person sending it out, you feel like it's repetitive, but like the audience like doesn't realize it. They don't know.
And that is how you create consistency. I think that's a big question we get all the time. Okay, I have my brand, guidelines, everything's done, but I need to apply it. How do I apply it for consistency? And we're like, just keep doing it. Just keep doing the same kind of, you can switch it up. And I think you've explained some really good ways that you can switch it out, right? And you can see it that you guys have done a great job of that. But the same general idea is kind of repeated through everything. And that's how you create memorability. That's how when someone comes across your content, they're like, oh, that's Gwell. That's definitely Gwell. They know who it is because they've seen it and they recognize it. And that's how you create that consistency for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. And it also makes it easier if you're working in a team, because they have a better understanding of like what the expectations are. And I think for us, that's been really helpful, because I have 2 people who help me with like our kind of social media and marketing, and one is only on social, but the other person helps me with like our site content and our email. So having a consistent strategy and clear messaging is really important, so that people don't feel like they're, talking to like 10 different people with all of these different personalities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that goes back to brand too, right? Like having a very simple, clear message and just saying that kind of over and over in different ways is again how you create that consistency. But that's ultimately, you want that brand message to be very clear, very easy for people to understand, and then you just keep repeating that message. and that's building that trust as well, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Kind of, I think I have my thought. I think it came back. So with back on the product photography and reusing it, something that we did when we kind of took the product photography that you had is kind of like you said, reusing it and relayering it, right? So we would take, I think that's something about having really kind of clean and simple product photography that you can, if you have a designer on your team or you have a content manager or social manager, anything like that, you can kind of we took the product themselves and started layering it over top of like text-based posts or things like that. That's how we created kind of this like fun layered element. So it doesn't feel like you're looking at the same picture every single time.
Yeah.
But you're able to like use the product itself in a different way, or the product imagery in a different way.
And we totally didn't know to kind of call it that, but we definitely saw that and said, all right, we like this. And we like replicated it in so many different ways. We like that. It was still fun. It wasn't super busy, but it just felt a little fresh. So we've done that with the products, and you guys did it with like text also, layering with the product images and stuff. And we've just kind of ran with it and had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, it creates that more bang for your buck too out of the product photography. And even if you have packaging, like your package as well, if it's just like on a clean vector that you can take it out and layer that on top of something else, it gives you just more options, more ways to keep using it.
For sure.
I mean, you got me thinking of like some new things that we could do with it. Now that
there's so many options with it. When you get like a framework that you can follow. There's so many variations you could do, especially if you guys have different flavors. Like there's so many different options you can do. There's always new imagery, like ingredient driven imagery, like open source. So I feel like, and just even like colors, like visual styles, like there's so many options to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways you can take your brand identity. I think that's something we can kind of go back to a little bit too, in terms of like your basic brand identity, right? You had that very clear, this is probably a good topic to talk about. Like, how do you take looking at your brand guidelines, right? You have your typography, your colors, your, everything that's lined out for you, packaging design, whatever that is, how you can kind of take that and move it into different applications. Obviously that's like the whole point of our conversation, but I think we didn't really touch on the specifics of the brand identity and things like that, and how you can keep it, how you can create consistency, but also change it up.
Yeah. So
I think oh, go ahead.
No, you go first.
Okay, I was just going to pull up your brand identity so I can kind of look through it and kind of think about how we pulled ideas from your identity, or from the style guide that you had, and pulled it into that.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up too.
I think when it comes to, Sam, you might have kind of some thoughts on this too, but when it comes to like playing with colors and typography in a way that you can still change it without it being too repetitive, but you're keeping the same, like, I think we should talk about like, what are the core things you want to repeat, and what are the things that it's like safe to mix up when it comes to your brand identity?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like having a type system, designated type system, so heading, body, subheading, whether you have like an accent font, I think the accent font kind of thing might start getting like a little bit where people want to change it, and then it starts feeling like a little bit not as consistent. But I think like a clear color palette, even different color combinations at that, like we always do do's and don'ts for like combining colors. And then even like additional, I'm thinking like imagery too. Trying to think what else. I feel like those are the real big ones. And if you stay with the same color palette, same fonts, and you should have like a designated type system in terms of like headings should be relatively like in terms of scale, the bigger piece, and then your body copy. I still think like within different assets that you make, you can have different sizes. I don't think it has to be like the same size, because I just don't think across different platforms, like story versus post, sometimes things can just be different sizes. They don't have to be like perfectly the same. But I would say like those three things are the most important in terms of like consistency.
And I think for us, we found it because we have a lot of colors in our color palette. So that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of like what we're posting, and all of our colors are kind of grounded back to like our base color, which is super neutral and can kind of go with all of them. So that helps. I think what has been a little bit more difficult for us has been the typography, because like we have a specific font and specific things, but like when you try to translate that on different platforms where those fonts don't exist, like how do you know which font is the most similar? Like how do you get the similar feeling and translate that? And I definitely think for like any brand, especially one who doesn't have a whole team devoted to like creating content, that would be probably one of the more tricky sides of it, because I can't tell you how many times I've Googled what is a substitute for this font on this specific platform. And sometimes you just have to do your best and say, at the end of the day, like some of these posts are literally living for 24 hours and then they disappear. So we kind of prioritize, let's make sure we're getting our message across the best way that we can, and we'll get as close as we can, but you're not always going to be able to get there. The place we stick to this is on our typography specifically, is on our website and on our packaging and any printed materials, but we're a little bit more flexible with social media.
Yeah, I feel like that's the problem with like Canva or like any of the other platforms. Like everybody has their own. It's like some support Google fonts, some support Adobe fonts, some don't do either. And if you don't have a team that has Adobe, then sometimes the Adobe fonts, it does get to be very tricky. It really does.
Yeah. I think you have a good approach though. Any printed material is your very, long lasting brand material should
Yeah.
stick as closely as possible as you can get them to your brand guidelines. But if you're doing, something like content, something that's shorter lifespan, that's
Yeah.
where you can really get as close as you can. But if it's not exact, like you said, it's not going to be up there forever. So
Like
And
if it's
to be honest, I feel like most people probably don't notice. Like, I think we would notice because we're on the other side of it. And like, I don't know,
Yeah.
at least I pay attention to that kind of stuff, but I feel like most people don't really notice.
yeah.
awesome. Yeah. And then with colors, you guys, I think that's a good point. You brought up a good point. You have like a base color. I think we always kind of look at it as you have about 3 usually that are your like primary brand colors that everything should kind of revolve around. And then you can usually on packaging and things like that, that's where you start getting some additional colors. And those you can play with a little bit more, but having those 3 that are like your core. So if you're going to have like a background on anything or something that's like your emails or something like that, using those core colors are great. And then you can kind of bring in the extra ones.
Yeah. So we basically, I said one color, but we actually have like 3 core colors that are like our brand colors. And then each flavor has its own color. So it kind of gives us the opportunity to play with all sorts of different combinations of that. Really, the only limitations we have with the combinations are for readability. So just making sure we have sufficient contrast so that all of our content and basically anything we do is as accessible as possible. Because I mean, I can't even see certain things if there isn't enough contrast, but otherwise we try to like be a little bit flexible and kind of just have fun with it, really.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. All right. I think we covered most everything. Yeah, I would love to wrap up though with some fun, just rapid fire questions for you. All right. Are you ready? Should we do it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So first one is, what's a CPG product that you've recently tried? Any product that you tried and love?
I was like, oh no. So I'm a sucker for like any drink. If it has really cool packaging, I have to try it once. So the sad part though is because I do this all the time. I just tried something and I know where to find it in the grocery store, but I don't know the name of it. So basically, just go in the store, find the drink aisle, and pick up whatever jumps out at you first. And that's right up my alley.
That's a good strategy.
That's a great strategy. Oh my gosh, that's funny. I can relate to that because I am such a visual thinker that sometimes people will mention a brand and I'm like, I don't remember what they do or what its product is, but I can see the logo in my head. So yeah, I can relate.
Any drinks that have fun ingredients, unexpected flavors, and that aren't super sweet, sign me up. I will try just about all of them. It's like my favorite thing to indulge in.
I love it. Me too. I love a good beverage. Like any of the beverages, all of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, next question. What is in store for Gwell this year? What can we all look forward to?
So we'll definitely have some more video content. We've kind of just been doing this in a super organic way, trying things out. So if you don't follow us on TikTok, we're experimenting a lot there and just kind of having fun. So check us out. We've got some collaborations coming. So we did some giveaways when we initially started, but now we've got all sorts of different collaborations coming this year that I'm really excited about, and a few new things in cookies and granola.
Ooh,
That's exciting.
Yeah, that is very exciting. All right. And then last question, where can people find you and where can they shop Gwell products?
Sure. You can find us everywhere at Eat Gwell. So don't forget, it's Eat Gwell. We're most active on Instagram, TikTok, slide in our DMs, say hello. We love when you do that. If you want to shop us online, you can shop eatgwell.com, or you can get it within 1 or 2 days shopping on Amazon, if that's what works for you and is most convenient. If you want to shop in real life, we're in all of the Erewhon, Foxtrot locations, Dom's, Elroy's, Cambridge Naturals, and several more. You can always send us a message if you want to see if we're in any stores near you.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. I'm glad we were able to sit down and talk about it.
Same here. Thank you guys for having me. And thank you for creating something that worked so well, that is literally still working for us.
Oh,
Oh, good. We're so
I'm glad you were
to
able
hear
to use it.
that. Yeah. All right. See ya.
All right. See ya.